I have no complaints. Now, once again, this is the victory run tape. So even if it's exactly yay for our team, so we're not under any whatever. And as soon as you're like, okay, we've evacuated it. Who gives?
Mm-hmm.
Were there? You've mentioned the wrestler. Obviously, you got that guy in. Was there any other characters that you think of that were just really?
That were characters?
Well, characters in terms of you see prototypes in BBSs that later make it onto the internet, but there's stuff that's just like purely BBS. Because when you think about it, like the first BBS, one of the places that claims to be the first BBS, Community Memory, which is 1974, had 4 terminals. They were 4 terminals. It was in a laundromat, a library, a office, and a record store in Berkeley, California, and that was where you could post. They had a jerk. They had a guy who was a harassing asshole on the thing.
You need the asshole.
Yeah.
You need him.
You don't have the board until you have the asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying, like, even when it was a 110 printed terminal sitting in the second floor of a records shop, there was a guy going, just letting loose on the thing. I mean, and so as a result, I like to pull out people like that, even though there's versions of them now. Can you think of anyone who was like a character? You mentioned wrestler, which I really liked.
Yeah, wrestler was great. You give yours. I don't know if I have one right now.
One of the BBSs that my best friend used to call all the time was called the Anarchy Zone, and here's the trick behind the Anarchy Zone. It was run by a guy called Master Hacker, and he was pretty larger than life. He had a really big signature and a lot of personality. And his presentation on the BBS was that he had taken over this BBS from the guy who actually ran it. He was running it on someone else's computer. This guy had set up a BBS. Master Hacker had come in, hacked the system so thoroughly that the guy couldn't turn off the computer, couldn't shut it down, and now Master Hacker was running things remotely. And yeah, he was pretty elite.
Any others?
That were actually sort of archetypes. I can't think of anyone like that. One of the coolest things that I remember from BBSing is I used to listen to a talk radio show in Chicago on WLS, 890 AM, I think, yeah, hosted by a guy named Bob Lassiter. And it slowly became revealed that he was a bit of a closet geek. His show was just a sort of, political, kind of muckraking, sort of loud, a talk show, talk radio show, sorry. But occasionally you'd get a hint that he was a bit of a geek, and it turned out that a board that I occasionally called the Apple Tree, which was an Apple II BBS, which was, sort of an anachronism even then, was that this guy called that board. He was friends with those guys. So I started calling that board more, and at some point someone decided we should try playing Diplomacy online. So we set up this Diplomacy campaign, and I've never played Diplomacy, and I'm not very good at it, but I'm calling every day, I'm doing my moves. It's taking, a million years, because it takes a million years in real life. And so I'm playing Diplomacy, I'm playing against Bob Lassiter, I'm listening to his show every night at drive time, and he's talking about, I really want to get home. He's talking over a 50,000 watt clear channel radio station that they can hear in, Hawaii, that he really wants to get home and see what's going on in his Diplomacy game. And I'm like, man, this is cool. I am so cool.
Did you ever get him to mention you online directly, or?
He just mentioned the game. I don't think he mentioned me on the air, but he did mention the board occasionally. And that was awesome.
Gets more callers that way.
That was really great. Yeah, 20 more. I'm sure he had a lot more callers than he did people he knew on the BBS.
Think of a subject that we haven't broached in some detail. I mean,
We haven't broached relationships, like romantic relationships, really. I don't know if that's of interest to you.
the answer is twofold. A, it's very interesting to me. B, I usually don't like to force people into that corner unless they want to talk about it, because a lot of people don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to talk about it, sure, but I'm not. You know,
Right.
I just don't like to make people uncomfortable.
Sure.
So, you know, if you want to talk about a particularly amusing relationship you either witnessed or were part of, all for it. Tragic, I'll also accept tragic. You know, but I just don't. I don't. What's the word? I just don't. Like
You don't pry. Yeah,
I don't like
sure.
to corner people, more or less.
Well, I can tell you a couple probably pretty funny stories. That hopefully when these guys see this documentary won't be pissed off about.
You don't have to mention their names.
I won't mention their names, although they'll know who they are. My very first boyfriend I met online. The people I had known through school, I had always known them, and none of them were ever interested in me romantically. It wasn't until I met people totally outside of the community I grew up in that I was seen as an attractive female. Now, granted, I was probably seen as the only female, but nonetheless, I felt good about myself because of it. I remember a little bit before meeting this guy, I talked to him voice for the first time, and that was really scary. Like, some people don't want to meet because it ruins their mental impression, but I didn't even want to hear someone's voice. It made me really nervous. I remember he said, well, why don't you pick up? Pick up. And I was like, oh, I don't want to pick up. And I picked up and I talked to him just about long enough to get his address, and I sent him something. And a few weeks later we met, and we liked each other, and we started dating. And we went out for 2.5 years, but that was when I was from about 15 to 17, and I changed a lot. And one of the things that changed was my interest in him, or my interest in, I don't know how to strike that. But I changed a lot through that relationship, and at some point I began to be wooed by someone else that was part of our BBS community. And what transpired was that I was upfront with my boyfriend about this. I said, you know, this has come up, this is sort of going on, I'm interested in this guy, I still love you, what do we do? And so he created a private subboard for the three of us to talk about it.
Did it have a good title?
I believe he changed the titles to his subboards pretty regularly.
Okay.
Like weekly, if not more often. But yeah, so he set up a private base for us to talk about how they felt about me and what was going on. And that was really screwed up. I think it was in some ways his way of kind of feeling like a little more of control of the situation. Feeling like things were more out in the open, but when I think about it now, it seems really, really twisted. I think he may have invited a fourth party to just talk about it with us at some point. But I don't really know what that was supposed to achieve.
Did it actually achieve anything, or did you just...
No, not really.
You know, if you don't post, that's pretty much the board. It's, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really end up with either of them, so...
Well, then it really worked, because
Yeah.
it told you weren't interested in this one as much anymore. And this one would have been a big mistake, because he's the kind of guy who did this. How's that?
Yeah, it was I think it drove people a little crazy. I mean, you talk about people feeling cornered. I think the other guy felt really cornered. Okay, well, you like my girlfriend? Well, let's talk about it here. What do you have to say? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not traditionally how guys work. You know, they usually don't.
No.
They don't. Usually
That's
they
true.
tend to be, you know, there doesn't tend to be a prospectus aspect to it. It
No.
tends to be more of a discovery aspect, really.
Yeah.
More of a, yeah, that's us, here, right now, in your bed. Sorry. Kind of. I'm gonna go get something. You go to talk it out. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna go get something to eat.
I wouldn't have dated in high school unless I had been online. Because my first boyfriend I met when I was 15, and then when I was about 17, I started seeing someone else who I knew was sort of part of that BBS community, though he had been away at school. He moved back to the area, and I had heard of him, and he did zines, and so I had read those. I knew of him, and I encountered him on a D-dial, and I started talking to him, and I said, "Oh, I know some people you know," and he was like, "Well, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about," and he was pretty reluctant to get to know me, and then we got to know each other, and it became abundantly clear that he liked me. The revealing, maybe the clincher moment was when I logged in one night to this chat system that we both called, and I checked my email. And you don't get a lot of room on D-dial email. You get 256 characters per message. Mm-hmm. So I checked my email, and I guess he had logged on drunkenly earlier that night and decided to send me some of the lyrics to Your Song by Elton John. And he hadn't really confessed anything to me at that point, and I was actually seeing someone else, but that pretty much sent the message. And I can just imagine how he must have felt the next day, waking up with a hangover, thinking, okay, I went to the bar, I came home, what did I do? Oh, shit. I was drunk, I got online, and I emailed the girl I like lyrics to Your Song. And then, he still had to face me.
Well, one could say it was one step removed from, say, calling you at midnight.
Yeah, but you have that safety. Like, he didn't have to call me at midnight. Like, he probably never called me on a regular basis then. We were just sort of friends online, and we'd see each other at shows or something. And you have that impersonality. It's like being in your car. You think you're safe. You think you're insulated from the world, and so you go a little further than you would normally.
Now, do you think there's any irony in the fact that your parents, who were so, insistent on knowing everything about every person you were possibly meeting, and yet you still were able to find someone online? Well,
I don't think they originally thought that. I have no idea what they thought. If they thought I was going to get prospected as a girlfriend or what. Their worst fears were realized right away, because when I was 15, the guy that I ended up with was 22. I came back from that first get-together, and my mom said, "So was there anyone you liked?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, there kind of was." And she said, "Not the 22-year-old. Actually, I think I might have told her he was 21. She said, "Not him, right?" I was like, "Well..." But she wasn't threatened by him when she met him, and somehow I got away with being allowed to date him, which is pretty crazy. I was also going to mention that my best friend, who actually lives in Boston now, she told her mom, we met when we were 14, and it was only a couple of years ago that she didn't tell her mom that we had met through debate, which is what she originally told her. No, we met on a chat system, and I thought she was really cool, because she They Might Be Giants. Really, which is no criteria when you're dealing with people on a BBS, but I thought she was awesome.
That reminds me of a story of me and my first girlfriend, for lack of a better term, who was named Karen, or Ren, and I went to have dinner at her house on the other side of the city, and we'd been hanging around for the afternoon and having a pretty good time and stuff, and then we were called down to dinner with her parents, and sort of as we're on the way down the stairs, she's like, "By the way, my parents don't know that I have a modem, so if they ask, you're in my English class." And I was like, "What's our teacher's name?" she says the name of the teacher, and then her parents are like, "So you go to the school?" And I'm like, "Yes." Just trying not to say anything and have food in my mouth through the whole meal. I didn't know how to fake that I didn't use BBSs. But she wasn't allowed anywhere near where all the axe murderers hung out. How
did she secretly have a modem?
I think she either they'd bought it from her and taken it away, and she'd taken it. Yeah, that's what it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they'd taken it away as a punishment, and she'd stolen it back.
Okay, so but all right. So it wasn't as extreme as them not knowing what a motor or knowing
Right,
what
that
was
was what I
evil,
originally thought.
and okay, all right. Not as scary as it could have been. And then the cat says, "Hi, look at me." Okay. Well,
I think it's an interesting thing about BBS is basically it gives little kids an opportunity to practice like the workplace harassment that they're gonna have to toy with later on in their lives, because like the way that a girl gets made a co-sysop or gets wonderful access or something like that is to just flirt a little. I mean, the first step of that flirting is admittedly just typing F, but
I never flirted. I mean, unless they were the people that I wanted to be my boyfriends, but I
Yeah.
never flirted for access.
no.
I'm just friendly. And
think most
let me
people-
tell you, if you're a girl online and you're friendly, people fall in love with you. And that's all you need to do.
Oh yeah.
Because I really got the impression that for some people that I encountered, I was the first girl that had ever talked to them. And that made me their soulmate.
Yeah, that happened for me too, except, it was a guy. Yeah.
other than that, it was perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm like on pyrotas and things like that, like you definitely wanted the girls on your side, because that was the surest way to ensure you would get to the top and win the game as soon as possible.
Yeah, if I think about it right now, if I think, like, when I was 22 and I pictured myself with a 15-year-old guy, that was unbelievable to me.
Well, 15-year-old guys are actually 12.
Right, that's part of the problem. And theoretically, 15-year-old girls are, what, 18?
Yeah, something like that.
So, I mean, I don't know, like, I was 7 years younger than the first two people I dated, and I've never dated someone younger. Not for any particular reason, it never seemed like an issue to me. My parents are 13 years apart, so I don't think they had the difference argument, they had the you're 15 and that he's too old argument on their side, but they met him and they judged him on who he was. And he was a good person, and they didn't find him to be a pervert or that he was going to corrupt me. There were a lot of people that were concerned. His mother had her lawyer call him and read him the Statutory Rape Act for the state of Illinois, just in case he was wondering. And apparently, fondling a clothed breast counts as statutory rape. So watch it. But as much as it does sound a bit strange now, at the time it didn't feel strange to me, and it still seems... It was natural. I don't know.
Well, I mean, because the thing is that now, in press and media, it's portrayed as it's always portrayed as a victimization.
I never felt like a victim, but and I'm sure some people are victimized. I'm sure people are victimized every day, at Walmart. I'm sure people are victimized, but probably more than they know.
My God, these socks were twice what I could have paid.
I know.
This price was 3 cents lower.
I think I thought of it as a cool thing. I think I thought of it as a nice thing that I was talking to people on their own terms. I was talking to people because they were interesting people to me, not because they were in my class or my prescribed age group or in a social setting that was accepted by society or in a country club or wherever people were supposed to meet when they were 15 at the arcade. I don't know. I was talking to them because they were interesting. Mm-hmm. And it was that whole abandoning of the snap judgments and the abandonment of the borders that are arbitrarily prescribed on people. Because, as adults, we know that somebody's 7-year age difference is meaningless in terms of how good a friendship you can have with them. And in terms of even how good a relationship you can have with them. You're going to have issues on how you relate. You may have differences in values depending on those differences. But I think that whether or not a person is good or good for you or right for you or you're in love with them is not age sensitive.
Mm-hmm. I think that one thing that's interesting about BBSers and their friendships is like, most of my friends I've met either through BBS or later through the internet, and it's really funny that you can have been friends with someone for like 5 years, and then you're like, so how old are you anyhow? You know, like, that would never happen in a normal friendship, I guess. And, or you can be like, you know, you've been really good friends with someone, and then one day you find out they're black, or something like that. Like, we played the game before of, you know, you walk into like a bar or a restaurant or something, and you're like, so which table here do you think is a bunch of BBSers? And like, you know, it's the table that's full of like guys,
A group
girls,
that doesn't go.
a bunch of
Yeah.
punks, some geeks, you know.
This is the greatest place ever on earth.
In terms of meeting people and people that were a pretty impenetrable shtick, there was a squirrel in the Chicago area whose name was Nibbler. And that was a challenge for me. I saw that and I said, I gotta know. I gotta get through this squirrel. I gotta break the squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta meet the guy. And I talked to the squirrel a lot online, and he was just all about giving acorns to people he liked and squeaking and nibbling on things. And I thought, no, there's a mystique to this. And I called him. He's very, very, very awkward, very timid. Somehow I bullied him into a meeting with me. And it was so disappointing. I think maybe that really was his best way of talking to the world. I don't know. I'm sure he was really nice, but it was creepy that he couldn't relate to people. I mean, BBSs were a haven for people that couldn't relate to people, and for that I loved it, and for that I loved those people. But you want the person behind a shtick to be brilliant, not dependent, I guess, on that thing. And that was tough.
So yeah.
But I probably just scared the hell out of him.
Well, you know, you look back and you go like, that was this girl, and she demanded I meet her, and I went and I met her, and I did nothing, and nothing happened. And, oh, I was such an idiot.
And 15 years later, she's in a documentary saying how big a disappointment it was.
That's the best time to actually have it. It would be best if he's like walking by and, you know, it goes up on the TV.
Yeah. There was this guy that was a squirrel. That's me. I'm still a squirrel inside.
Making big rings on the cosplay circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna take that somewhere. You know, there was a guy who I loved his BBS, and one day it crashed or went down, and he put up an answering machine, and the answering machine was as funny as the BBS by far. And he changed the message all the time. So the BBS is down, but blah, blah, blah. And he'd say the funniest damn things. And so for a long time, I just called the answering machine just to listen to him. And he was just like, what was it? He's like, I got turned off by the Mexican phone company, Taco Bell. It's one of the jokes I remember from him. And he like had all these other things he would say. And, you know, it was an indication. The guy was what made the BBS. I mean, he was the funniest part of the BBS. And he was the driving creative force, and he didn't need the BBS to be funny. I mean, he was funny on his own. Him talking on the phone was funny enough for me on a message. Dial a cool guy. He doesn't. You know,
they don't have a context for it.
Yeah,
either.
how do you do? I mean, how do you express it? And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, is because there is this enormous amount of wit that is being lost.
There's a great character in the Toronto Eats news group. He's sort of faded away, and I'm not sure how much of a character he is, but it's the closest thing to, like, a character that I've seen, and a BBS-like environment that I've seen in years. There's a guy that calls himself Dimitri the Greek Stud, who posts to this sort of dining out news group, and he posts these fantastic, elaborate, detailed, well-considered, qualified reviews of restaurants around town. He's got their phone number, he knows how much he paid for everything, he sampled the wine, he sampled his girlfriend's dish. It's a great restaurant review. He knows a lot about food. Interspersed through all of this, you know, he even knows if they've got handicap access. Interspersed through all of this, he mentions the ethnicity of every single person working in the restaurant and the potential for getting pussy when you go there. Completely straight. And half the people think he's Satan. And half the people think he's the fucking funniest thing there ever was. He's like, this is a fine restaurant, they've got an excellent selection of these vintages, blah, blah, blah. We like sitting outside. They were too close to the smokers here. The trout was good. This wasn't as good. The risotto was good. The spinach was not so good. The Romanian waitresses are amazing. If you've never tasted Romanian pussy, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you have got to get down there. Get 3 beers in these women and they'll go all night. The desserts were really good, blah, 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 blah. Like, he's unbelievable. And I think he's not, he's playing it up, although I do think those things are on his mind. But.
Do you have any other thoughts about being a sysop? About being the person who ran a BBS? Because you chose to do it. You chose to go with it. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
It was a very satisfying thing to run a board and to make a board, and I miss the feeling. Like, most of my friends were sysubs too, my close friends, and it was just sort of an unspoken assumption that everything we were ever doing at any time could just sort of be put on hold every time someone called one of our boards, so that we could just sort of take a peek at them. Which really gives you a complex as a user, by the way. I mean, I remember for the longest time when I was using other people's BBSs, I would write everything very carefully because I knew it was important not to say anything embarrassing and have to backspace it because the sysop would be watching. And he'd haul you into chat and say, I saw that and I don't like what you're trying to get away with there.
Screw chat. My old boyfriend, my first boyfriend, Andy, he would break into your message. He would bracket what he was saying and write sysop, : and then he'd put in his commentary on what you were working on at the moment.
Jeez.
And then you'd keep writing, and he'd break in.
Yeah, that's like if you're going through your life and it's like suddenly God says, actually that's wrong.
Ward mentioned to me that he thought extra space was a waste. So he would go back and edit people's messages so they didn't use up as much space. And it was a major thing for him. And
scary.
He looks back at it and he's just like, someone go, blah, 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 space, 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 blah, blah, blah. He'd go,
Wow, control freak, eh?
That was a bit.
God. I think Andy just
the guy who
to
edits
get a word in.
This American Life does that, right?
Well, yeah, but he's also he actually has a space premium.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know if space is in this. I mean, in the BBS world, I don't know. I guess they could take up space, but that's pretty insane.
Yeah. Well, at the time it was an S100, which I don't know if you've ever bumped into an S100.
I haven't.
It's old enough that it's old enough that 8K, the 8K memory board was this big.
Okay, I can see that there would be concerns, but
so he was always very, you didn't have to, but he was very edgy about it. The original BBS actually, when you called, it reset the machine, pound the machine, so that by the time it hit the third ring, the machine had rebooted so that it would answer your call, and that was how they ensured that the machine was always up and ready for you. It was pound. You'd actually power cycle the machine when you called it, and that was how they got. And the thing would just go, "Oh, someone called me." That was how they got around the auto answer. Was that an auto answer would power cycle the machine, and the machine would go, "Whoa, answering." And that would be the first thing it did. Oh, and he got the first idea for the first BBS on ARPANET. I always find it funny when people talk about, there were BBSs and then there was the internet. Like, there was the internet, and they got this great idea, and they went with BBSs for a while until the internet was, done in the oven. And then they went on.
Oh, this may not be interesting at all, but, I'll bracket it maybe in an interesting way. But, I mean, you talk about PD boards, and I think, I don't remember what I called them, but I think I must have called them real name boards. And most of the time I gravitated towards the handle boards, but I was living in both worlds quite comfortably. I didn't have crossovers really, but I spent a lot of time on Mac boards. That's how I learned a lot about the Mac. That's how I got a lot of software, not pirate software necessarily, but that's where I got a good grounding. And then I sort of found the community aspects were stronger in the handle boards, maybe because the people were younger, they were less serious, they were more like me. I don't know. But I found it really interesting going to all kinds of groups, especially being young. Like, it wasn't so strange being young and meeting a bunch of kids in a mall in the suburbs, but it was pretty strange going to a Macintosh users group where everyone was 30 or 40, and I was 15. And it was strange running, running FidoNet groups, or I participated in the Stillwater BBS list, the big Chicago BBS list that was pages and pages long, and they sort of had deputies for a certain range in the alphabet, and my job was to call all those boards every month, see if they were still up, and see what any changes were. And they all just had one line, and, I wish I could remember all the abbreviations. I know there's still Stillwater's lists online, of course. But I hadn't even remembered World War IV until you brought it up, and I have this huge flashback, because, of course, that was, like, the most popular one for quite a while.
It was, yeah.
WWIV.
Yeah. Most people, when I talk to that's a good example of pronunciation, because to a person, anybody who mentions it, and by that I mean not somebody who's responding to what I'm saying, calls it WIV. All of them say WIV boards. And I'll say, you know what it stood for? And they're like, oh yeah, World War IV. WIV.
Interesting.
Like, without an exception. The SysOp, SysOp thing is another one I always like to pull.
SysOp, yeah, I must have said SysOp for years until I discovered I was being horribly gauche.
My friends and I always said WizOp. I only say SysOp for the benefit of normal people.
WizOp.
WizOp was better than SysOp. I mean, come on.
I actually have 4 separate pronunciations of SysOp. That's great. And 2 of them, of course, are one person pronouncing it that way, and nobody else does.
And what are those?
SysOp and Systop.
Systop.
Systop, that's nice. Person have a lisp or something?
He just would reduce system operator to Systop. And he did it enough times that I asked him about it. And he said, yeah.
That's great.
And I mean, he's been running a BBS since '82.
Wow.
It's now a website. So this isn't. And he went to BBS Con. So I bet you didn't.
I
think that's BBS Con. Well, he went to BBS Con. So he went to a convention of BBS guys and still came away with Systop. So, all right, it's there. That's what it's like. There's a few other ones that I'm forgetting. Of course, I completely forgot about the Z thing. My father-in-law constantly tries to get me into positions where I say Z just so he can laugh at me. He's like, what's that letter after Y? I'm like, Z. He's like, ah.
That's great.
Just for fun.
Simple pleasures.
Yeah,
Just simple pleasures, that's right. That's the little extra little that he can give me. In front of his friends, also very important.
The American.
Hey, when you're up here, you're the foreigner.
Yeah.
You gotta always remember that. You're the foreigner. You're the funny one. You come from that funny place with all the missiles.
Well, and then there's the, what's the graphic interchange format, Jeff?
Interchange.
CompuServe?
Oh, GIF.
Or is it?
Yeah, it's GIF.
Or is it GIF?
That doesn't make any sense.
I know it doesn't make any sense, but at some point someone told me GIF was right.
I pronounce it GIF.
Yeah.
Even though
it's not graphic.
For graphic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just, you look at it and you say, GIF.
And how do you abbreviate CompuServe?
CS?
CI $. CompuServe Information Systems.
Yeah.
CI $.
Yep.
Because it was expensive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or the source, which you abbreviate to the losers. Because there was CompuServe and there was the source, and they were at each other's throats. And then one day CompuServe bought the source, and there wasn't really much of a question anymore. And then AOL bought CompuServe, and that was the end of that. And then AOL bought everybody.
Yeah,
That's how all the fairy tales end.
I miss the fact that some of those people made it into the modern age, and there were people actually posting to news groups and living on the internet with addresses like 657.113.291181 at CompuServe.com.
Comma.
Yeah, well,
Comma.
yeah, that's great.
Like, what the fuck? Respect yourself. Come on.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah.
How can you do that?
Hey, Ebert had it. Roger Ebert was a CompuServe for a long time. They
That's
used
funny
to print
stuff.
his address. They'd say, go bother Ebert. Ebert loves that. Make Ebert happy. I'm always interested in the guys who wrote the programs. Because to a man, they tend to be pretty funky.
How popular was Sapphire? Is it even, or Sapphire or Pyroto, like, is it even worth discussing? Or is it so unique to Toronto and Montreal that...
Well, the two questions don't match. It's
Okay.
always worth discussing.
Uh-huh.
I discuss AE lines. You even know AE lines?
No.
See, that they disappeared by 88, so they're pretty much, they're called ASCII Express lines. They were the #1 way to pirate Apple games. There was a program called ASCII Express. It was a terminal program. Well, it had a answer mode, and you could call it, you'd enter a password, and you were on the drives. And you could say, look at the drives, or give me a file from the drives. Everyone used these things. They were the king of the online world. Well, now they're gone. Nobody knows what the hell an AE was. So I want that on tape. So Sapphire and Pyroto, I've seen quite a bit on Pyroto. Pyroto seems to have a following in America and other places. Sapphire, maybe not as much. Tim tells me he sold about 100 copies.
A lot of people used that without buying it from Tim.
Right. So I mean, he looks at them. He doesn't look at any of his BBS programs as being a major success. You know, but he's judging it by the amount of how many times they were sold.
Right.
Now, whether or not
I don't think he's... Yeah,
seen,
that's the point I was going to make, is that in terms of what Tim's success is, like, his programs were all social experiments. And even though he never made money off of them, and he was pretty unsuccessful, and even though I disagree with him about a lot of things, like, there is just no refuting the fact that a large chunk of my worldview comes from my experiences on Pyroto and Sapphire. Like, I probably, in the way I conduct myself in everyday life, I'm, you know, just as you were saying about that guy sees his routines in AOL these days, like, there are probably some of Tim Campbell's routines in me. And that's a pretty weird and scary thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, like, Pyroto forces a certain personality. Only a certain kind of personality can succeed, and Sapphire the same thing, but in a more democratic way. But yeah, I mean, Pyroto, to explain a little further, I mean, you have to post in a certain fashion in order to get points that you need to succeed in the game, as well as you have to have the diplomatic skills and questions and answers. But your messages are all rated by the entity that is programmed into the game, and you learn what that entity likes, and it's really tough to ever unlearn that. So you learn to speak concisely. You learn that, like, certain types of arguments will get you a good rating if they're well stated, well punctuated, well spelled, and like, even at the most subconscious level, I mean, that has got to change how you express yourself. I read the source code for Pyroto, so I know that it looks for certain keywords, and I probably use those keywords in my everyday conversation more than I would otherwise.
You get so much esteem.
Yes, I do. Sottle is pleased with me.
You threw me by abbreviating Spirit of the Land.
What, you're gonna say that every time?
Oh, you... No.
Come on.
No, you say Sottle.
Well, there's another pronunciation one for you. Tostle. Tosottle. Sottle.
It's always Sottle.
Well, I didn't know what it was before today, so
Right.
I've never actually played Pyroto.
Poor guy.
Because my problem is whenever he says Pyroto Mountain, I think of Crisis Mountain, which was an Apple II arcade game where you had to run up and down this little volcano solving things, which was a great game at the time and very mind-blowing for its incredible graphics.
But you're solving puzzles.
But hearing
only.
people talking about, and on Pyroto Mountain this all happened, I'm thinking like, oh, what, in between throwing the logs into the fire? Toss! Okay! Yeah, exactly. His mention of you was rather positive. He just said that you he thought you were a great guy. He just said, I don't think he has nothing. He said, I don't think he has entirely great things to say about me in some ways.
We've had some differences. I thought that the system was about struggling and the way struggle forms you and either makes you a good person or a bad person or evolves you in some way. And I thought he thought that too, but as it turned out, he thought something different. And at one point, he declared me and 3 other people who were playing Web Pyroto to be the winners. And I was like, what do you mean? We can't win. You can never win the game.
Which we thought was the lesson.
Yeah, I thought that was the lesson. I mean,
Yeah.
You can have supreme power, but does that make you the winner? I don't think so. But, yeah. So I said to him, no, you're wrong. I didn't win. Please take my name off the list. And he wouldn't.
That's one way to get you out the door. Make you the owner of the bar.
Yeah.
And then send you off somewhere. Okay. I mean, I talked to him about that. He talked to... I'd be poorly phrasing it. He spoke a bit about how, upon looking back, there was a programmed spirit of the game beyond him calling it the spirit of the land. But there was a spirit.
The real spirit of the land was the vibe that was going on between the people that were there and the community that they were making.
Right.
And the problem that we had when we quit Web Pyroto was that he was, for various reasons, some of them his own personal tastes, some of them economic reasons, skewing the data a bit by I would say he was contaminating the results basically, by trying to steer things in a certain way. Whereas I thought that the beauty of Pyroto was that the community was shaped out of everyone figuring out their own power with each other and everyone figuring out how to talk to each other and dealing with it. And yeah, some people were going to come in and be assholes to you every day, but you know what? That's going to happen to you in life.
It resulted in some very unpleasant circumstances, but
that
we
would make
liked that.
Right, it resulted in unpleasant circumstances that made some people want to not play the game. And you know what? So does life. But then, because he had certain things in mind, like, oh, that lady was nice, or I'd like to get more click-throughs on my banner ads, he would change certain dynamics, or they would institute weird, like on Survivor, when they switched the tribes, like he would just sort of throw in these things that had never been part of the game, that were suddenly new rules on, that we all had to figure out how to get such and such kind of points, or such and such kind of other points that didn't make any sense, and didn't have anything to do with the game we had been playing, and were designed just to make things more fair, by his hand,
Yeah.
which seemed incorrect, because it seemed like the goal was for us together to make things more fair, or more evil,
or if
more
we didn't
scary.
succeed in making them more fair, to pay the price for that.
Or whatever it was they were going to be, but not because somebody had an object. And when he put the object on it, that spoiled it.
One of the things he mentioned that annoys him the most, or annoyed him, was when people would take issue with stuff on Pyroto, the Web Pyroto, by quoting from the 1988 manual to the original program.
The original program was the true program, though.
But he
I'm surprised that annoys him, because
that's what people would say, back here, because it's been 14 years, and people would quote from this manual he wrote 14 years ago and go, this web-based internet thing you're doing, according to this manual, you shouldn't be. I asked him, why didn't he just rename it a new thing?
Yeah, I think
and
he
said
should have.
because people would go back to the manual. Back in the manual, it was called Pyroto. What have you done?
That's
And
a
it-
cop-out.
no, that's not true. I mean,
They would have just gone, it's Pyroto. You're wrong. You're calling it Magic Mountain. I think that's what it's like at the top of his head, he would have called it Magic Mountain.
there was a clone of Pyroto called Magic Mountain, so he wouldn't have gotten away with that.
Yeah, he had some interesting things to say about the clones that were pretty funny.
They were pretty pathetic. Pyroda was the only one that was any good.
Yeah, I don't know if there'll be other people I talk to who know of Pyroda. I throw it out at people, and they go, and we'll see what they respond to. I am interviewing a wide variety of people in Toronto. The only reason I'm not interviewing many people this weekend is because it's a family weekend. Otherwise, I'd be like doing like 3-4 interviews a day for 3 days, just hammering them. Otherwise, I'll be sure to ask other people about their opinions of Pyrodo and stuff, and that's a very interesting.
I hope people
did you deal much with free speech or with Sapphire or?
I don't know free speech.
Free speech.
But yeah, Sapphire was
free speech is the one that also had AI routines and also did stuff.
I mean, yeah, Sapphire was my board and at least 3 or 4 other boards I called.
Okay. I mean,
most of which, fortunately, weren't called the Pinnacle Club. And most of the Pyrodas weren't called Pyrodo Mountain. Again, against Tim's suggestion.
So as a sysop, you take the staff of like, it's nice what the creator had in mind, but that's great. I'll file that under what the creator had in mind and go on in my own way.
And Tim provided a very nice starting point, in my opinion. But unfortunately, he wanted it to end at his starting point, and I wanted things to evolve.
Okay, that's nice. Makes sense. I'm also, by the way, I'm really trying not to pit you against Tim.
I am very grateful to Tim. He provided probably the funnest game I ever played in my life, but yeah, it just seems like we had a slightly different take on it.
Have you met him?
No, I haven't.
He moved to Toronto right around the same time we quit and stopped going to the get-togethers.
It probably would have been confrontational if we met him.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have wanted to smack him.
Well, he took away our best toy, so...
Yeah, like, his demented thinking kind of, yeah. I don't know, like, at some point, there were points where he was like, yeah, you really get it. Like, he said to me, he's like, you really get it. And I'm like, great, because I'm really enjoying this. And then I realized he didn't get it. And then all of us, all of our friends...
I really think that's the case.
All of our friends...
The users got it, because they were playing
we honestly
his very well-programmed
don't
game.
think that he really understands his own game. Like, he doesn't... For instance... Here's a way I think you'll understand this. He doesn't think that this should be a bad guy. The guy that came to the door, that didn't come in, he's the bad guy on Web Pyrodo. He's the baddest guy there's been. And Tim fucking hates him. And Soup, what does he do? He antagonizes. He changes his handle 3 or 4 times a day, which makes it impossible to send him a message because you can only do it by.
He swears a lot. Tim can't handle that.
Swears a lot. Changes his name. He's changed his name enough times. It's in the rules. The game has a certain set of rules, and different players have power so that they can structure the spirit of the land. And the servants of Sodal. They're not called sysops or wizops even.
Servants.
They're supposed to serve the spirit of the land, which is in a sense the greater good, the greater community. And so they're not supposed to really delete users or anything unless there's real abuse, something extreme
breaking the rules.
Breaking the terms of service, for instance. The rest of the things, the people who are in a higher position of power are supposed to deal with that themselves because it's their community. You don't want shit lying around your community. You clean it up yourself. So that was all fine, and everyone was okay with the rules. Nobody ever disputed the rules or said there was anything wrong with them. Soup goes, he changes his handle 5 times a day for 4 days. Tim says, I'm going to start a new rule that you can't change your handle.
But
what?
The users probably would have done that for him if he hadn't done that.
Yeah, the users, if they had had a problem with it, could have any time dealt with it. But because it personally annoyed him, he decides to change the rules of the game after 15 years. Just basically because this guy's getting under his skin.
And he was getting under our skin too. Let's just make that clear. He was our worst enemy. But when Tim banished him and said he couldn't play anymore,
just because he was mean,
that's when we quit.
Yeah. He unbanished him a few days later, but we decided that if the people running the game were going to be that flaky and dumb, we didn't really want to spend 10 hours a week or more.
Yeah, we didn't
30 hours a week.
Invest that much energy in something that could just tip on its side at any point.
Yeah. Or where we would be forced to click a certain amount of banners in order to stay online. I mean,
Yeah.
fuck you.
They actually did that for a while.
Okay, that's this tape.
But yeah, he really didn't seem to understand that you're gonna need that guy. Like, especially in a power game. Of course there's gonna be a prick. There has to be a villain. Have you ever seen a movie where there wasn't, an adventurous movie where there was a struggle, where there wasn't a dark side? He would really like to pretend that there's not gonna be there, and that he would rather have a bunch of 50-year-old ladies talking about gardening who don't get teased now and then than have somebody who's pushing people to do better.